D, one of the developers for the US Forces side of the modification, and welcome to another dev blog. We're going to be talking about the development of the Cougar MRAP today. This dev blog is going to be a little bit different than some of the other ones we've done. The last one I did was scripted, and I wanted to try and eliminate some of the rambling, but I thought it sort of constrained a lot of my feelings about building models, some of the challenges and so forth. So I've just written down a few points and I'm just going to try and wing it and we'll see what happens. Some of the stuff I want to talk about are how we take a model which already exists, so in this case the original Ridgeback MRAP, and modify it to a specific specification. And in this case we've actually had 3 people now who've worked on the model. Myself, who did the interior, Cleggy, who built the original Ridgeback model, and Shevdinsky, who works for us, who built the A2 variant of the Cougar, which is the variant we're going to include in-game. We're going to talk about how we got to that iteration, how we built the interior, the referencing process, so how do we acquire references and so forth. We're going to talk about the turret, as we are going to be using a new turret. You'll see that in this update. And finally, everyone else who has helped build this model, as there's a lot of people involved on the team who have very specific skills, things I definitely can't do, and we're going to talk about what they contributed. So we'll get right into it. To start off, the original model, the Ridgeback MRAP. We acquired this as Cleggy gave it to us. From there, Shevdinsky, who works for us, he was the one who actually took this and took the task of converting it to a Cougar. So there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. The exterior stowage all had to be redone, removal of the slat cage, and so forth. He originally settled on making the low roof A1 version. However, he changed that as that was not used anymore, and we went to the modern A2 version, which is the one with the high roof. And we settled on the Cat 1 A2. There's 2 variants of that normally, the Cat 1 A2 and one fitted with independent suspension. However, ours has the solid axle suspension. For anyone who's wondering how MRAP naming works, there's generally in US service 3 categories of MRAPs, Cat 1, 2, and 3. The categories are related to the level of protection they offer. So Category 1 vehicles are generally 4-wheel drives with the lowest level of protection, although still very high protection against small arms and IEDs. From there, the Category 2 vehicles are the 6x6 heavier vehicles that sort of act as armored personnel carriers. They generally have much more seating, and they are going to have improved protection. And then finally, there are the Category 3 vehicles. These are usually 6x6 vehicles specifically designed for counter IED use. So these are vehicles that are going to go into IED situations or possibly IED situations. So they are extremely heavily armored, but also very specifically built. So these aren't suitable as troop carriers for patrolling. And as a Cat 1, this is a 4-wheel drive, only suitable for patrolling. It'll only hold, 4 to 6 people. And one of the challenges immediately is there are many, many versions of the Cougar, 4 and 6-wheel drive, counter IED, medical, command, troop carriers, and so forth. And there isn't a lot of information on any of them. So the version we settled on was the A2 that is configured more as a patrolling vehicle, so it doesn't have any counter IED kit fitted. One of my favorite things to do when it comes to modeling is taking a project that already exists. The first time I did this was with the RG33L, which is the 6x6 version. We began with the 4x4 RG33 model, and from there I was given the files to convert it into the actually used 6x6, as the current 4x4 iteration we have in game was never actually used overseas by US forces. It was prototyped, but in the end they never ended up fielding that variant. And funny enough, the 4x4 variants only came a long time after the 6x6s had been built. So that already gives you, in terms of design, some constraints to work with, because although you might rather do something a different way, you can't, because you already had that exterior shell, and if you're just going to modify the whole thing, then you really haven't saved any time. But luckily I didn't really have to. The work done by Shevdinsky was amazing. It was very clean geometry, very high detail where needed. From there, the first step was to make the shell of the interior, because the vehicle had only faces for the exterior. So if you looked from the inside, you would just be able to see out, because a face only has one side. So building that shell is critical, as that's going to allow you to start placing your components to get your scale. And once I had made the shell, that was the first thing I did. So it's very easy to add small details like switches, lights, gauges, and so forth. But that can all get messed up very easily if the major scale of everything is off. If the seats are in the wrong place, or the dashboard is at the wrong angle, or it's too big, then all those switches are going to look off. So the first thing I always do is build the dashboard, any major stowage areas, get the position of the seats correct, center console, and so forth. And once that's right, that's going to allow you to add those small details. Another difficulty with this vehicle is, although it has so many variants, that means it also has a lot of unrelated photos, and there are very few actual photos of the interior. When we developed the interior, I only had access to roughly 10 photographs of all angles, which makes it very difficult. And some of the ways we get those photos are looking at modeling sites, literally pausing YouTube videos and screen capping them to get specific angles of, say, the back door roof. One of the specific challenges I had with this vehicle was the seating. The Cougar has IED dampening seats, as in the event of an IED blast, these seats are going to have a specific harness and very big bolstering to keep you in that seat to prevent you from flying around the vehicle and becoming injured further. And these seats were very difficult to build. They probably spent 3 or 4 hours just trying to get a basic model of the seat with the scale down right, because the scale is key. Making sure those bolsters, geometry-wise, looked the part and they were thick enough and everything was rounded enough, and that's very difficult. One of the reasons people always say, why don't you guys build a new Blackhawk model? Or why don't you build a C-17 Globemaster model? Building something that's curved is extremely difficult to a flat edge surface. One of the other elements we needed to make for this vehicle was a new turret. We currently have the Objective Gunner Protection Kit, or OGPK, fitted to most of our MRAPs. This is a good turret, and it was sometimes used on the Cougar, but we wanted to be as authentic as possible, and the most recent versions of the Cougar had the Marine Corps Transparent Armored Gun Shield fitted, which makes sense as this is a vehicle used now solely by the United States Marine Corps. It's not used by the Army anymore. Although I had created this turret before the Cougar, I never have talked about the development of it, so we'll talk about it now. This was an absolute nightmare to get right in terms of scale. This turret is extremely angular compared to the OGBK, which is mostly flat panels and was very simple to build. And getting the scale of this turret right was absolutely critical, or else the whole thing looked off. I had actually tried to model this turret years before, and I completely failed and just gave up because I couldn't get the angle of the panels right, and the geometry was horrible. So this time I paid a lot of care to getting the geometry correct, making sure the scale looked good, and now the current Marine Corps Transparent Armored Gun Shield turret we have, I'm very happy with the scale of it, with the detail, and with the overall profile of it. So at this point we've had the interior made, the scale right first, then adding all the little details, some things like the fire suppression system. That was really fun to do with all of the hose cabling, and making the seats obviously not so much fun. However, once that interior and that turret was done, although the model was complete, there was a lot of work still to be done. The textures supplied by Shiftinsky were amazing, to say the least. Extremely high detail, very accurate, great looking textures. But when I put them in Arma, the lightness was just off, because the way Arma renders light compared to, say, a rendering engine is very different, and it often doesn't look nearly as good because Arma simply doesn't support as many shaders and things, as it probably is not feasible due to performance limitations. So the first thing I did was I darkened the textures, I modified some of the elements, and then the other thing was we always try and make our vehicles in woodland and desert for the different environments in Arma. And there are Cougar MRAPs in woodland. However, I didn't know that until I had already painted the camo by hand, just making it up as I went, but fair enough. Because I didn't have access to the Photoshop document file of the texture, I actually had to cut elements out in Photoshop that I didn't want the camo applied to, and then sort of merge them all with the camo I had painted in Substance Painter onto a new variant to make the actual woodland texture. But I'm still very happy with how it turned out, and it matches the rest of the vehicles, which is great. So the textures had been made at that point, interior made, the exterior we only had to do one modification. In real life, there is only one roof hatch. on the Cougar Cat 1 A2 variant, so I had to delete one of the hatches and modify the UV map slightly, but other than that, the model still remains very much as Shiftinsky made it. Others, so the 12th Monkey, he does an enormous amount of work for our US Forces team, and one of the things he did was actually setting up some of the fire from vehicle animations, getting the feet to touch the seats, the hands on the grip of the weapon and so forth, as I don't have a lot of experience making animations. And also Bosti, who knows how to set up the PhysX profile for the vehicle to make it very accurate, so making sure the engine torque is right, making sure the horsepower is right, and that the vehicle is going to drive properly, and that even the suspension is going to damp properly and things like that. So in that sense, it's a very collaborative effort. Cleggy made the original model, Shiftinsky made the American version, I built the interior, the 12th Monkey did all of the setup of firing from vehicle proxies, gauge animations, and so forth, and Bosti made the PhysX profile that makes the vehicle drive and run realistically. So with all that work in mind, the final product is the Cougar Cat 1 A2 MRAP. One of the most interesting things is there's no M or mark designation for this vehicle. So in-game it'll just be reflected as CGR, short for Cougar Cat 1 A2, and then the weapon type it's equipped with. There'll be M2, Mark 19, and obviously an unarmed version. So I want to give a great thanks to everyone who has supported the mod. Over 500,000 downloads of both the US and Russian forces is amazing. And thank you everyone for the support. Obviously the joke is we see a lot of request comments, but a lot of people still post, gratitude for us making the mod, and that's great. We're very happy to do it, and we definitely appreciate the support. So thank you once again everyone for tuning in to this dev vlog. I hope you've learned a little bit about the process of how we make a mod, how we go from a half-finished model to a fully finished one, and why we don't always stick to the project timelines and stuff like that, because we don't have any, and we just do it, and sometimes real life happens where someone can't continue modeling, and that's how it goes, but in the end we get there. So thank you everyone, and goodbye.